We will be examining the communal living situation between Bar Peter Brown, Picchio Verde, and the house where 7 gringos lived for 2 months. The commune is located in the city of Guadalajara in the western state of Jalisco, Mexico. Within Guadalajara, we were in the Chapultepec neighborhood, a vibrant area with an abundance of restaurants, bars, and nightlife. The lodging is located between Bar Peter Brown, the restaurant with the enigmatic name, and Picchio Verde, the vegan cafe. From the outside, these three buildings appear to be independent, but living in the commune proves that they have a more complex relationship. Peter Brown and Picchio Verde framed the guest's days. You could wake up to the bustling of the cafe and fall asleep, perhaps, to the thumping of Toto's Africa.
What is your first experience with Peter Brown?
So the first night I went to Peter Brown was the day before we moved in, actually. And I saw on their menu that they had a pizza, the Peter Brown pizza. I thought, well, they named it after themselves, it must be a good pizza. I get it, it's covered in bacon, great, sausage, fantastic, cheese, dandy, and maraschino cherries.
My first experience there was my first day there. I went there and my buddy got a pizza with maraschino cherries on it, and I kind of questioned everything from that point forward.
It was evening. I was with my friends David and Tyler. It was good.
Observing the clientele at Bar Peter Brown was an exercise in watching two cultures combine. The restaurant aimed to be a fancy watering hole, with craft cocktails, craft beers, and a simple menu with new age twists.
How do you think the Picchio Verde Bar Peter Brown clientele is different from those at other restaurants in the area?
I would have to describe them as hipsters.
They're hipsters.
Very hipster.
One word, hipsters.
However, the clientele they drew appeared unconcerned with their marketing efforts.
On social media, Bar Peter Brown is an oasis of fancy cocktails, well-behaved dogs, and cosmopolitan clientele. Picchio Verde fancies itself a distinguished but quirky cafe with subtle hints of veganism, free-range coffee beans, and social justice. In reality, Bar Peter Brown is an oasis of beer and tequila, one aloof dog named Bosco, and young adults with expendable income that are looking to unwind after a long day at work. Picchio Verde is actually a small coffee shop with great murals and seems to make most of its business from some gringo that yells through a random window in the wall every morning. The advertisements don't necessarily match the reality in either location, but both businesses appear to remain successful in spite of it. Perhaps the regular clients don't follow the restaurant or the cafe on social media, or perhaps they don't care that the things are different. It is a traditionally Mexican space, masquerading as a high-end gastronomical refuge.
Noise remained a constant specter while living in the commune. With Picchio Verde open by 9 a.m. and Peter Brown open until 3 a.m., quiet time was precious. The commune became familiar with the early morning hours and decided to use that time for research when sleep was impossible.
One of the things we noticed very early on was that the restaurant next door stayed open till 3 a.m. Wednesday through Sunday. And two of the big questions for us was, why did they think this was an important time and space for them to create, and was it legal? The short answer is it didn't seem like it. On the hour, every hour after 11 o'clock, cops came by and a waiter would go out and talk to them through the window and they would move along. The bigger question of the actual space was a little more unique. Throughout the day, up until 8 o'clock at night, the decibel levels were a pretty consistent average of 58, whereas on the evenings where the rooftop space actually opened up, the music generally came up to about 83 decibels on average, with peaks around 92. Now, the unique idea of this is that it wasn't the music that changed that much, but actually the conversation and the social environment continues throughout the day. There was chill Spanish music and classic American music such as Electric Feel or Uptown Girl in Closing Time. So nothing crazy or dance as you'd normally think at 3 a.m., but actually it was the conversation and environment that raised the decibel as the hours passed on.
Picchio Verde occupied a unique space in Chapultepec, a cafe that offered organic and vegan snacks, grooming products, and cooking products was rare in the area. We noted that very few patrons even considered purchasing anything but coffee, leading us to research the organic food scene in Greater Guadalajara. The rarity was consistent across the city, but we did encounter another Picchio Verde. When we visited, we found an entirely different environment.
Two cafes, two entirely different environmental locations and clientele, yet quite the same. Picchio Verde, the cafe. No. The organic cafe understudy. It's interesting how the two cafes have strategically located themselves just a few blocks out of the main road, have the same menu, same supplies for their vegan offerings, serve more women, and carry out 70% transactions in cash. Customer loyalty is the thing for them. However, what's more interesting is that the more commercial cafe in Chapultepec loses out on the one in Zapopan in terms of customers by 50%, despite having 30% more seating capacity. Could it be the range of alternatives in Chapultepec, or could it be the relatively less appealing space? While the cafes were exactly the same size, they looked drastically different due to their length to breadth ratio. This has left me wondering, does ambience and space psychologically affect whether or not you choose to dine at a restaurant?
The living experience in the commune was constantly evolving. While we nominally had total control of the space, several employees and helpers would enter the lodging area with frequency, using the keypad on the door. Sylvia would clean the house daily. Oscar would perform maintenance on faulty water heaters or light switches. The manager of Picchio Verde would store her bike in the living room. The space was truly seen as communal, particularly during the daylight hours.
One of the things to me that differentiates Peter Brown and Picchio Verde from the rest of the food scene in Guadalajara is the sense of community between the employees there and the locals. There are many regulars that go there just to sit and hang out for a few hours. One of the regulars at Peter Brown that I found interesting was a retired American named Chris. Chris had an interesting relationship with the staff, constantly teasing them and making no effort whatsoever to speak in Spanish. However, the staff seemed to love him, and they always greeted him favorably. As it turns out, Chris was the coach of the soccer team that the Peter Brown employees played for. It was a year-round league within the city of Guadalajara, and the other regular patrons of the bar apparently frequently attended their Saturday games. I actually went to a game one weekend, and I noticed that Chris was more of a benefactor and an admirer than a coach, but the bond between the staff and the locals was evident at the game. The inclusive nature of the owners who make up the three spots in the Casa Brown shared space surely played a role in the way the staff treats their customers.
Learning about the owners of Bar Peter Brown and Picchio Verde proved to be a daunting task, almost enveloped in a certain mystique. It's not that we believed the employees and managers were intentionally deceiving us. It just seemed like no one really knew who was in charge at the time.
Who is the owner of Cafe Picchio Verde or Bar Peter Brown?
Peter Brown.
It's a mystery. Nobody knows.
Well, I know at least for Peter Brown, the owner is Pedro Moreno, naturally.
The experience in the commune was enlightening and uniquely challenging. Aside from the culture shock of moving to a new country and integrating into Mexican life, the commune itself demanded a separate style of assimilation. It demanded guests forego Americanized expectations of privacy and quiet hours while yielding to Mexico's laissez-faire relationship to time management. While we may not have a perfect understanding of the goals of the commune's owners, we left Guadalajara knowing that Bosco was pulling the strings all along.
When you're a key, you're family.
Nailed it.